Hello everyone. In this video we're going to take a look at some event handlers that we can tie to the list view and list view contents. So we're going to look at events such as selection changed and a click event on the checkbox to determine whether it was checked or unchecked. So in this first example, we're continuing with our week 5 demo where we're displaying a list of car objects. And in this one we're looking at cars in a list view. In order to create an event that happens when you select an item on the list view, we're just going to add the event for item selected. So we can create a new event handler that fires when we select an item on the list. Now this event only happens when you click on an item that is not already selected. So I've allowed the IntelliSense to build the event handler for us, and we can go into the code behind and start working on it. So we're just going to perform a check to make sure that before we try to retrieve the item that's selected, that it does actually exist. So we'll do an if statement here that says if the selected item is null, we're just going to leave this method. Otherwise, we can safely retrieve the selected car from the selected item property. And we have to make sure that we do a typecast either using as or using a traditional typecast like this. Once we have a reference to the selected item, we can do whatever it is we're trying to do to this item. In this case, just to prove that we can select it, I'm going to show it in an alert. So we're going to put the car properties in here and run the app to make sure that we can successfully select an item. So once the app has started, you can see that the data has loaded up here, and I'm going to click on an item to select it, and when our selection changes, we'll be able to see the pop-up with the correct information. Now, just as a reminder, we don't have to create these event handler properties in the XAML side. We also have the option to generate them in the C# side. So if I were to remove this XAML property, I can go back into the C# and add the event handler here. Using the plus equals allows us to reference that same event handler. Okay, let's move on to a different type of event. Now, in our list page, we have as one of the controls a checkbox. And the checkbox here tells us whether or not the car is hybrid. Now, if we wanted to make a change to this by checking the checkbox, we can create an event handler here for the checkbox check changed event. So check changed fires when the status of the checkbox changes. And if I just accept the new event handler here, we can go back to our code and write some code that responds whenever any of those checkboxes will change. Now, if we want to find out which checkbox it was, we can go from the sender input parameter to get the specific checkbox that allowed us to fire this event in the first place. And our first step is just to prove that we can notice that a checkbox changed. So I'm going to add our async keyword here, and we'll bring up our alert. Let's give this a try. Now you might have noticed at this point, if you're coding along, that as soon as you start this app, we get 2 alerts that happen right away as soon as the app starts running. My app opened on the other screen, so I couldn't record that part. but I got two versions of the pop-up, and the reason why is because as my list view was loading in, the 2023 Tucson checkbox got checked and the Leaf checkbox got checked as well. So one of the issues with check changed is we can't distinguish whether it was checked because that's the way the page was loading in or whether it was checked because we clicked on it. So this is a problem that has a solution that is going to come through the implementation of MVVM and the view model. It's not something that we're going to deal with today, but it is something that I wanted to address since it's quite obvious. But as for responding to the event during regular app usage, you can see that we can notice when we have checked or unchecked a checkbox. So for now, we're going to move on to another event, but we are definitely going to address that loading issue at another date. So in our next example, I'm going to move to a different page so we can demonstrate how to create events in code when we're generating a collection view in code. So again, this was a demonstration that we had done in class where we created a new collection view and set up all the internal parts of the collection view, so the data template, the layout, and all the custom controls right inside the C# code. So in this example, we are going to add the events via C# instead. So if we want to create our check changed event on the checkbox, after it's created here, we can simply find our checkbox name, CB hybrid, and we'll add an event handler to the check changed event. Once we add the event handler, we can scroll down and find it down here. So we can write our code inside this event. So we have to think about, from our UI point of view, what do we want to happen when you click on the checkbox? Now, maybe in the future, something that we want to happen might be that a property gets changed on an object, which gets saved to a collection or maybe ultimately to a database or some other source. But from our purpose, the question that we are interested in is, does clicking on the checkbox change the selected item? So let's take another look at our app's UI. Here's how our app's looking in Windows anyway, and we have the option to check and uncheck the box, but checking any of the elements in the collection view is something totally different. So we want to know, does checking the checkbox cause the associated item to be selected? And if so, do we want to fire that item's selected item changed event as well? So we might have a cascade of events that happen here. So let's do an example where we kind of bring those two things together. So when we change a checkbox, we have access to the sender, which is the checkbox that sent this event. So I'm going to start there. I'm going to do a data type conversion. You can use as, or if you want to avoid the green underline, then we can do a regular typecast. We know that the sender is going to be a checkbox because the only place that we've assigned this event handler is on the checkbox objects. So we can create that box, but what we need here is we need to be able to select the item that that box is a part of. So if we go up a little bit and we take a look at our checkbox, the checkbox and its binding is part of the controls that are bound to one car object. So if we're looking at the binding context of the checkbox, we can tell that the binding context is a car because the properties that we're binding to are car properties. So if we want to receive the appropriate car that this particular checkbox happens to be associated to, we can go up a level to the binding context of this checkbox. And from there, we can get the car object. instead of assigning the binding context, I'm actually retrieving it as a car object. And again, we can cast or use as. Now that we have the car, we can change the selected item. So our CV, that's our collection view from above. Selected item is going to be assigned to that bound car. Now, in order to prove that we have changed the selected item, I'm going to use an alert that shows us the information of the selected item in the collection view. So I'm not going to look at my local car reference. I'm going to go back to selected item and make sure it's been updated. We'll just put out a little message and we'll say here, set up the rest of this, and we'll put in the selected item into the output. So once we got past those loading selections, we can prove that we can access not only the checked event, but also change which car is selected. Now, if I click on the item itself, nothing changes because I don't have a selection event yet for the collection view itself. But clicking on the checkbox, you can see that highlight in the background. It does change which item is actually selected. So to finish up our demo, let's do the selection changed event on our collection view. So up here where we're setting our collection view properties and the bindings, we can add the event handler to our collection view at this time. We're going to go into our collection view and find the selection changed event. Notice that the name of this event has changed from the list view that we used to use before. So we're going to add a new event handler here, and then we can get the code down below. So inside a selection changed event, we have lots of different ways to obtain the selection. Because remember, in a collection view, you can have multiple selections. So the first one, the one that we're familiar with, is when we want to get the collection view's selected item, singular. And again, we need that typecast. If you have multiple selections, we can create a list of objects by going into our collection view, selected items, plural. Another option is you can go into the event arguments. And from there, we can get current selection, which is also a list. If you want to get one particular selection, you can provide an index into that list, just like you can use it like as if it were an array. So current selection at position 0 is the first of potentially many different selected items. Today we're just working with a single selected item, but it's interesting to think about the alternatives. Once we've got that selected item, we can display some information about it. Let's just use this. And we'll change the name of this so that we can prove access to the items that we're selecting. Now this time when the app loaded, we had 4 alerts display right away. And part of the reason for that is because of the previous check changed event. But the other reason is that inside the check changed event, I modified the selected item. Assigning the selected item like this causes the selection changed event to fire, assuming it's not the same selected item as it was already selected before. So we had the checkbox that was firing selection changed, and also displaying the alert for the check. And then we had it happen twice, once here and once here. So again, those are problems that we're going to solve later on by improving the design with MVVM. But I'm going to comment this out in future executions of the app just so that we don't double up the events. So now we can test out our selection changed by clicking on various car options and seeing the selection message appear. One thing I wanted to point out is when you check a checkbox, we get the check message, but it does not change the selection because I commented that part out. So if you want to make sure that clicking on a checkbox also selects the item next to it, you'll have to capture that and perform the selected item. Just something to think about when you are creating event handlers on various list types of controls. So I hope you found that helpful and useful. And if you have any questions about it, like always, you can send me an email or speak to me in or after class. Until then, I'll see you in the next one.